All right, we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live episode of In Lay Terms. I'm your host, Payman Ascari. Apologies for the delayed start. I had some technical difficulties on my end, so that's on me. We have today with us Sean Taylor. Sean, I may have spelled your name wrong with an H, A, and a W, but you apologies for that as well. You are
It's all
a
good. It's
PPC.
all good. I've been called worse.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm not as organized as I should be yet. I'll get there. You are a PPC candidate and an independent candidate. So maybe if you could start by telling us what riding or ridings you're running in, and then you can tell us all about your amazing background, including the fact that you've seen combat.
Sure. So I got involved politically in 2018. I was a founding member of the PPC when they stood up an EDA in Kelowna Lake Country. I showed up for the meeting and was on the board. And I got involved because I saw a lot of things going on in my country that I didn't quite understand, but didn't make a lot of sense to me. And it seemed like Maxime Bernier was the only guy speaking the truth right now at the time. And it was a little weird that he did it in a French accent. I didn't usually look to Quebec for the voice of reason in Canadian politics, yet there it was. And I got to know Max over the next year a little bit. And they asked me to run in the 2019 election in the South Okanagan West Kootenay riding, and I was a candidate for them there in the last two federal elections. Um, the last federal election, the things that I said during the campaign caused me a lot of trouble at work. I actually lost my job. I was an emergency nurse in Grand Forks, and I lost my job talking about the things that were going on in the media and in the hospital. And I became involved in political or in provincial politics, and now I'm running as an independent candidate in Boundary-Similkameen.
And what riding are you? Are you still running for the PPC?
I'm not currently a candidate, but I'm yeah. Uh, I'm the decision hasn't totally been made yet, but I'm still with the party. I still believe in all of the in the platform and the positions they take. I haven't been in touch with them as much recently, but I plan to work with them in the future, whether as a candidate or in another capacity. Being the only non-whipped party in Canada, it's the PPC is kind of like a coalition of independents, right? Given the party structure, and right now, I think that they're the only federal option that's viable.
Uh, well, when you say a non-whip, can you explain for the audience what that means?
Okay, so yeah, so as a candidate or as an MLA for a provincial party or as an MP for a federal party, um, whipped parties means you have to toe the company line. So regardless of what your constituents want or what you believe is the best course of action, when voting on legislation, when speaking publicly about things, you have to toe the party line. So if there's something about the policy in the Conservative Party or the Liberal Party or the NDP party that you don't agree with, and you think would be better to go another way, you're kind of handcuffed to what they deem as the best course of action. Whereas the PPC, you don't. You get to vote as an independent. Like they want you to. You're not going to be a PPC candidate if you disagree with like 80% of their platform policies. But like if there's a certain if your constituency sees things differently and want you to behave differently than the party's main line, you have the ability to do that within the PPC.
I want I like holding the audience's hand and kind of explaining things out a little bit better. So, what would be one thing where if you were in the Conservative Party of Canada, uh, they would say you can't do that, whereas in the People's Party of Canada, they say yeah, you're allowed to do that. Can you think of an example?
Yeah, no politician likes talking about it, but for example, abortion. right? Like, no, yeah. It's a really hot button topic for people. Um, the Conservatives, they put out their milquetoast statements and don't really want to have a position because they don't want to alienate segments of the voting population. Um, Max was like, I I can't speak intelligently about what the current, the latest and greatest composition is for them, but I know Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson, who's a devout Christian. She introduced a private members bill during her campaign, and was proposing to put that forward. And there was a lot of dissent within the party, right? Because this is a topic that a lot of people look at differently. But she had the freedom to do that. Much and a lot of people accused her of doing this and saying it hurt the party because it's such a divisive issue. But that's the beauty of the PPC. She was allowed to do that, right? She thought that was important legislation. The riding that she was running in felt that way, and she made that proposal. Whereas, people I know in Ontario and people in Quebec, there's a lot. She got a lot of flack about that, but Max and the party let her do that. Right now, like running as an independent, I answer to my constituents and my constituents only. I don't have a party line to toe. Um, Given we have two main parties here in BC, the NDP and the Conservatives. After the amalgamation, they just folded up the former Liberal Party into the Conservatives. Um, you know, my I would be more aligned with the Conservative platform and the Conservative outlook, and I would most likely be voting with them on most things. But as an independent, I get to vote in the best interest of my riding. So there's people are starting to recognize that a lot of the party infrastructure is captured operation within this, and not just our country and our provinces, but around the world. People are waking up to that. Hey, maybe they're not working in our best interests, and we're seeing this move towards independent candidates. And the PPC has demonstrated that, being the fastest growing political party in Canadian history. A lot of people are fed up, right? We've been playing this LibCon ping pong for the last century and a half. The Laurentian elite control both ends of the spectrum, right? Like, they don't really care who's in power. They're a tool. They're both sides are a tool of them. So I think that talking with people on the ground, right? The majority are still back in their team, but people are starting to see, and this this move towards independence and less party lines, I think it's inevitable, and we're seeing it. We're a little behind the game here in British Columbia. You look at Nova Scotia; they've got independent candidates in the legislature. We have one right now. I forget what his name is. Adam Walker, I believe, down on the coast. He was an NDP, and he didn't want to toe the NDP party line, and they booted him out, right? But from what I hear, I think he's quite liked in his riding, and it sounds like, and he's running as an independent, right? One of the other things, of course, to muddy the waters, we saw an amalgamation between the B Cups, or the BC United Party, and the Conservatives, and because there was a lot of long-time established politicians within the B Cups, or the former Liberals, that displaced some of the Conservative candidates, and displaced a lot of the Liberal candidates. So they're actually running as independents now, and slandering the people that have been here, fighting this fight and running as independents originally, saying that, well, we're actually, we're a higher quality independent because we were vetted by a mainstream party. It's like, well, the mainstream party is a problem. So, yeah, I know it's interesting, right? Like, we're watching the change of the face of BC politics right now. And for the first time since 1903, when we moved towards a party system, we're seeing a move away from that. And it's early days. We don't know how it's going to go, but it's exciting. It's exciting.
So we got somebody from the audience, Zork Kuckberger. Are the more local independent we have in the legislature and the parliament, the better. So you got a supporter.
Perfect. And with things the way they are, just because you're an independent doesn't mean you're the man or the woman for the job either. I'm not saying that, right? What's transpired in British Columbia and across this nation and others over the last few years has caused the engagement of people that have never been involved in politics, right? To get involved. And when I look around at some of the other candidates that are running, like Corinne Morey in Kootenay Central, like she has been exposing corruption with the government and the unions. She's another fired emergency nurse like me, and she's been laying this stuff out. She's been in the fight for the last few years. She's able to articulate the problems that exist, and they're so desperate to keep us out. So you look at what's happened, like this musical chairs and the things that's happened within the Conservative Party, right? We've, in a very public way, like they've been kicking out tons of people, really, really good candidates, people that have been vocal over the last few years and standing up to, government overreach, things that are hurting our healthcare system, and had been involved within the Conservative Party, and they've been kind of excommunicated out. And there's a few of us that are, they picked the fight with us, right? I'd much rather be working in emergency than doing this, but this is where we're at, and seeing the quality of people that are stepping up and taking the fight and trying to inform the public of what's actually going on. It's a unique time in BC politics, and I'm excited to see how it goes. Given that the NDP and the Conservatives seem to be neck and neck in the polls, if you have a good independent candidate in your riding and you give them the mandate, you have a lot more leverage, because a few independents could be the balance of power within the legislature in the next term, right? Given that they're so close in the polls. So I think, this splitting the vote argument that everyone makes, it's actually, it would give your riding more leverage to put an independent in your seat. So, yeah, it's cool. We'll see how it goes.
Can you give us a tally? Like how many good candidates has the BC Conservative Party just completely kicked out?
Oh, there's a lot. And there's a lot of good candidates in the Conservative Party too, right? I've been at this for a little bit now. I had no idea when I got involved, right? Yeah, I don't know what your trajectory's been like, but I tell you, like when I showed up in 2018, I was like, something's wrong. I want to help, right? And what's been revealed over the last few years, and whether you're in politics or not, I think as a society, we've covered a lot of ground in the last few years in a hurry, right? We've come a long way, and we all haven't landed in the same place, right? You look at the amount of deception being used within the media and with the messaging being delivered by government agencies, and it's divided a lot of people, and we've come to different conclusions. The things on the ground, the stark reality on the ground, is becoming so obvious that people are starting to see it. And just because just because you're working for the Conservative Party doesn't mean you're part of something nefarious, right? There's a lot of good candidates. Like I was involved with the Conservative Party, right? There's a lot of good people trying to do good things. When I see the decisions being made, right, and I try to temper it because I had actually been asked to run for the Conservatives, and I don't know, I wasn't really showing the door. I was just kind of, they just ghosted me, and I've got to look at that, and it's just like, okay, well, maybe Sean's a loudmouth prick, and we don't like his messaging. Um, I think that, under a Conservative banner, I would have won handily down here, given the sentiment on the ground and what we've seen over the last few years. I But it isn't just me, right? Like I could write that off. I'd accept that. It's like I'm not everyone's cup of tea, right? No one is. You can't. Not everyone loves everyone, right? And it's just like, okay, I wasn't the best choice for this riding, but when I see this happen, with Roger Harrington in the Penticton Summerland riding, right? He was nominated. He's been articulating what's been going on and been in the fight for the last little while. He's been campaigning his ass off. This guy's he's got 40 years dental practice. Like he's got name brand recognition in the community. He would have won handily as a Conservative candidate, but they booted him. They liquidated the entire riding association, right? Put in a new one and parachuted a candidate in there. Corrine Morey, she's been in this fight. She's been doing town halls and informing the public of what's been going on within healthcare. The lack of service that British Columbians have received over the last few years. It's incredible. And the work that she's done, she's smart, she's articulate, right? And she knows the problems and she's been fighting these things. She would have won handily in her riding, right? Dr. Stephen Malthouse, he was actually named as a candidate, and they fired him 45. Yeah, within 24 hours, he had been fired. Jan Webb, another fired nurse on the island, she was named as a candidate. She was booted out. Patricia Weber, Alexandra Wright, like that's why I'm saying it isn't just me. So when I look at this trend, right, Dr. Stephen Pellick, like a world-renowned scientist who's been showing people the 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 misrepresentation of science by the government that's been going on and the absolute fraud that was perpetrated against British Columbians and Canadians, right? These amazing people, and all being pushed out, right? So I don't. I'm just judging them by their actions, right? I hear there's a lot of good candidates. I don't know any of the candidates, that are still in. All the ones that I've known have been booted out. So, um, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit heartbroken because I like John, right? Like I don't. I'm sure you watched that thing that he did with Jordan Peterson, right? And and I talked to John and I supported John and endorsed him on social media and at live speaking events and stuff like that. And it's just like, um, I hope, yeah, I hope he's successful in what he's doing. Um, but given the fact that everyone that's been on the front lines of this fight and articulating the problems um, that we're facing, why would you eliminate all those people and replace them with candidates who are just, it's like, I don't know these people, right? And um, they've got no history, or I'm sure some of them do. I'm sure some of them do, but a bunch of names that I haven't seen around, and they seem to be showing up for the job, running under the blue sea. It seems like when you look at a party getting rid of candidates that would easily win their riding because you can't have their voice in the legislature, I think that's problematic. But a lot of people, and having talked with people, because I'm friendly with these people, right? We all want this. We all want the same things, but being told consistently over and over again, the public isn't ready for the truth, right? We can't say the truth yet. We have to get in. We have to get the NDP out, and we have to behave in a way that's acceptable to people. Whereas I'm kind of like, if you're unable to articulate the problem, how can we expect you to fix it? It seems pretty straightforward to me, right? And that's the politics. That's the politics end of it, and where we're at. Like you look at Maxime, right? He was the only. Well, Max aside, Max isn't elected, right? He got arrested and all that stuff, but Max wasn't elected. So there's what, just spitballing, 1,800 MLAs and MPs across the country, like 338 in Ottawa, 93 here in British Columbia, about 160, 180 in Ontario, 140 in Quebec. But across the country, all the provinces, territories, and the House of Commons, we've got 1,800 politicians. With what we went through in the last few years, pardon me, over the mandates, how many of them stood up and said, this is wrong?
None.
One, Randy Hillier,
Right.
In the Ontario legislature, in the Ontario legislature, right? Randy Hillier, he stood up and he said, this is wrong. This is hurting Ontarians. Like, this is hurting Canadians. This is unjust. This is tyranny, right? And they're still trying to put his ass in jail. One out of 1,800. And I'm sure you're watching. We're probably preaching to the choir here now, right? But like you've got to look at that. There was one guy, one elected, and I know there was municipal people, and little comments were made, but to stand up loud and proud and say it over and over and over again from the soapbox that you've been given by people that you're sworn to protect and work for. We had one guy, and they're still dragging him through the courts, slandering him, right? And I think the public pretty much knows that deception occurred now, right? Like, we're a little ways past it. And all these things that these crazy conspiracy theorists were saying has turned out, okay, well, this was all true, right? They lied about a lot of stuff. You look at the medical statistics, and all-cause mortality didn't really change during the massive global pandemic, right? The hospitals, like we saw the videos, the hospitals were all empty. I've been an emergency nurse for 16 years. It was the best cold and flu season I'd ever seen, right? 2017 was a bad year, right? We had people dying in the hallways, and 30 people in the hallways, and the ICUs were full, and it was completely mayhem. No one talked about that. But when you cut through all the stuff, because we're a couple of years past this now, right? So we can look back, and we see, like, all-cause mortality, there was no real change. But we're starting to get down into the into the rabbit hole stuff, right? It's just like, well, what is a pandemic? Well, the WHO redefined pandemic in 2008, just before the H1N1 in 2009, where it had nothing to do with morbidity or mortality. It just had to do with caseloads, right? So all these cases. And we know that a PCR run at 40 cycles, you'll test positive for just about anything you're looking for, right? So when you look at the policies and the things that were used to deceive people to get them to behave certain ways, this is pretty much public knowledge now. And we're going to reelect these people, right? They brought us here.
Can I pick up on that?
Yeah, sure.
So you mentioned Corinne Maury earlier. I talked to her, and the sentiment was with this whole shuffle in the BC Conservative Party, we're basically these people that caused this problem with COVID, we're just going to reelect them. So how do we break through that? Because that doesn't seem right to me, where you're rewarding people that did wrong.
I'm not a very good politician,
Yeah,
right?
same here.
Yeah, right. I'm a soldier and a nurse. Okay. And what is a soldier's duty? A soldier's duty is to advance on the sound of the guns. And in this messed up fifth generation war we find ourselves in, this information war, the sound of the guns is in politics and in media, right? I recognized a threat and I tried to warn my fellow Canadians. And they called me names and they destroyed my careers. And they've been dragging me through disciplinary processes for the last 4 years. Um, I took an oath. I took an oath in 2002 when I joined the Army. And while I don't remember really what was said, and it was probably an oath of allegiance to the crown, like in my heart, it was to Canadians, right? This country that has given me so much, right? And I've been privileged to um, live a life of service, right? I've worked as a paramedic, a firefighter, an emergency nurse, as a soldier. A two decade career in the military. I got the ADHD, right? I like the chaotic, and I loved my jobs, and I was good at them, right? Um, and I tried to warn people about the things that I was seeing, and I was slandered in the media, and I was kicked out of the army and fired as a nurse, and and doing these things. And the thing that I find most scary is how few people did that, right? We know their names, right? We've got a few here. We got a few here in British Columbia, like Dr. Stephen Malthouse, Dr. Hoff, Dr. Nagacy from next door, Roger Hodgkinson, um, Corinne Maury, Kristen Nagel, Dr. Trozzi out in Ontario, right? And there's others. I don't have them all, but there are so few people that we know their names, right? Dr. Dolores Cahill, um, Sherry Tenpenny, Dr. McCullough. Like, we know their names all around the world because there was so few. And the way that they were punished and slandered, and now that we're kind of, you know, a few years pass and it turns out that the things that these people said and were called liars for, we recognize it as true, but they're still slandering us, right? Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. Um, the I finished my disciplinary hearing a little over 10 months ago, and we haven't heard a peep from the college yet. And Dr. Hoff's been put on. Um, he's been adjourned. They don't. I think they're scared to go up against him. But we're seeing all these delay tactics, and during my hearing, their own evidence showed that everything that I said and all the things that they were accusing me of lying about was true, right? Dr. Hoff, he wrote that open letter to Dr. Bonnie Henry, which is the government, the chief health decision maker. questioning is like, this is what I'm seeing. Like, I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to do, and this is what I'm seeing with my patients, and we're hurting people, and people are dying, and um, and they're still calling him a liar and trying to destroy his life. But in the process of this, you know, and and this is true to a person. Like, I haven't met anyone who's gone through the things that we've gone through that hasn't come to the same conclusion, right? And we're all in. We're starting to see what this is, and we're not going anywhere. And a lot of people are just like, okay, um, I think a lot of them out of ignorance. It's like, oh, okay, well, I went along with the program, and it turns out the program wasn't really the best course of action, and there was a lot of deception there. And I've been complicit in this. So we really want to forget about this and move forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So a buddy of mine who was on my PSYOPs team in Afghanistan, he's a member of a municipal police force, and he led the charge in the fighting the mandates and the forced vaccination in his police force. And they've had members die and several injuries where people will never be able to use uniforms again. And through freedom of information requests, um, they've got email chains showing that the brass knew that this was hurting people, and yet they continue to implement these policies. And they've been told to stand down. Their own union has abandoned them, right? And they're like, "This is over." And this was like, "What are you talking about? We're friggin' police. We investigate crimes, and crimes were committed, and we want to see accountability, and we want to see justice. We're not going anywhere." And it's alarming how well they can scapegoat the people that are actually standing up for the citizens of this nation, and how willing the citizens are to go along with the name calling and throw these people in the garbage, right? So I think, the important thing is just to be consistent in our messaging and just saying, like, these things happen. I can't not see it through a soldier's eyes, right? I was a frontline healthcare worker during this, and I saw what the mandates did to people. I held the hands of people that this cost everything, right? The fact that loved ones weren't allowed into hospitals, to hold the hands of their dying wife or father, parents, right? Like, it's absolutely insane what occurred here. And the fact that everyone went along with it, and anyone who didn't was completely hammered, right? And everyone's just like, no, we just want to move along. We don't want to talk about that. And it's just like, crimes were committed. And whatever, you look throughout history, like, I'm not an idiot, right? Accountability, maybe we'll see a little bit. Have we historically? Not much. I just don't want it to happen again, right? And if we are going to, I guess, start to turn this ship around, because a lot of people are figuring out something's wrong, right? Um, and if we're going to start to turn the ship around, we need to start now. And I think that we've been shown what true leadership looks like. That's what we need to start electing into positions that can actually make a difference. So, yeah, electing the same people that brought us here, I think, is counterproductive at this point. Um, whether the public is ready for that remains to be seen. I'm out here I'm on the campaign trail. I'm out here in Oliver, and I was at the Grape Festival here yesterday.
How did that
And
go, by the way?
Let's
To get
just say,
into physical altercations.
um, suboptimal.
Yeah.
Right? It's just, it's ignorance, right? I think most people have a good heart. And um, you look at, they know how people are wired. We've known for a while, right? How people are wired and told the same story. 95% of us come to the same conclusions, right? That's just the way we are. And they're very good at telling stories. And as someone who's paying attention and in this fight and wanting to help people, um, it's frustrating at times. Like when I go around and it's just like, hey, how's it going? I'm an independent candidate. I'm running for MLA in this riding in the next election, and it's just like, no, no, no. I'm NDP. I'm a union. I work for a union. I'm orange, team orange all the way, right? And it's like, I grew up in an orange household, right? My dad was union. The NDP today isn't the NDP of Ed Broadbent's time, right? The NDP used to be for the working man. They used to fight for the middle class and the working stiffs, right? Today they're the we'll chop the wiener off your son team and then give them a bunch of opiates. Like, it's insane where we've come, right? And the inability to recognize that. They're like Riders fans, right? Green or die. Like everywhere you go, it's just it's like a cult following, right? I'm team orange, I'm team blue, I'm team red. And it's like, can't you recognize that the teams aren't working for you, right? And a lot of people then they just don't see a problem, right? And you point out the absurdity, like I think, like, yeah, you talk about, no, I'm happy with everything, the way everything's going. And it's like, okay, well, you live in a jurisdiction where raw milk will land, selling raw milk will land you in jail, but cocaine is legal, right?
Welcome to Canada. Yeah,
Yeah,
2024.
they're, they're closing hospitals, and emergency rooms and dumping massive amounts of opiates on the street. Like not that long ago, we called that an opium war. That's how you destroy nations. That's what we did to, you know, and we're doing it here. When the
Sean,
leading, oh, go ahead.
I I wanted to run something by you. You mentioned earlier you said psychological operations. You were doing that or were somewhat involved with it in the
Yeah.
military. I have this uh, theory that the media and the parties they're not really separate. They're sort of just one organization, and the media is like the watchdog and that establishes the Overton window. And the parties, the political parties, they're very good at pushing things to the left. I'm talking about what happened to the BC Conservative Party. Like the moment Stephen Malthouse was announced, they attacked the guy, and John Rustad bent the knee, or the board bent the knee. It happened a little bit earlier with Jan Webb, and I've just seen these dominoes get knocked down. So they're very good through the media to keep it to the left, that Overton window, but there's no pushback to the right. What are your thoughts?
So politics is downstream, right? So you've most people have heard that saying. You get the governments you deserve, and I believe we've got the governments we deserve, right? And I look at the level of absurdity that we're seeing now as something that helps. Like we talked a little bit about this the other day. And I look at things a little differently coming from a psychological operations background, right? Like I look at um, what do we need to show people to get them to change their behaviors or the way they see things. And I think Justin Trudeau is the best guy we've ever had, right? I think Justin Trudeau has done more for the freedom movement in this country than Maxime Bernier, right? Because it's so obvious what he is. And we need obvious right now. And I was talking with Trudeau supporters here yesterday, right? Not everyone sees it, and some people like that, right? Like, there's a segment of the population that they want the government to do everything for them. They want to be kept safe, whatever that means, right? But politics is downstream because we choose them, right? Apparently. I don't know. That's come into question over the last little while
Questionable,
too,
yeah.
right? We've got we can't count ballots anymore here in British Columbia. We've got the machines to do it now. Um, Whatever. That's a whole different can of worms. But you look at um, the control and you look at what they do. So let's just take a quick look, for example, at independent media, right? Which you would fall into. So we look at this independent media and it's just like, okay, well, these are guys, there's no motivations. It's not it's not CBC, it's not CCTV, it's not Global. But when Max ran in a by-election, right? Andrew Lawton from True North Media, Kean Bexit, right? Who had appeared to have a good relationship with Max before, they were on point putting out, conservative talking points consistently, slandering, just stuff that didn't even make sense, but it was good headlines, it was sensational, right? They're accusing him of being WEF puppet because he visited Davos once 15 years ago when the Conservative Party is implementing Davos doctrine in real time. Like, it was completely ridiculous for anyone that knew what was actually going on, but it was effective. And they completely blackballed him, right? Well, now Andrew Lawton is going to be a Conservative candidate, right? Like, it's bought and paid for. You look at these things, and and as far as those candidates getting kicked out, if you're so scared, and maybe it's just a different outlook, and they think that we'll say whatever we have to say to get in so we can make the changes, right? The ends justify the means. And that's the impression that I've gotten from a lot of people here, and they're good people, right? They've come to a different conclusion where I'm like, it's the truth that's going to set us free, and we better start speaking it, right? And if you're too scared to talk about what's going on right now, how can we ever hope for you to be able to solve these problems, right? So are you going to water this stuff down? um, it's two different schools of thought. I believe the truth. I think people need to know the truth. I just look at what's transpired in this country over the last few years. These mandates have killed more Canadians than all the wars in our history. We've been socially fractured like never before in history, right? It's what they've done has driven a wedge between the strongest social bonds that exist within our species, right? Brother and sister, husband and wife, parent and child, the strongest bond that exists for us socially. And they found a way to drive a wedge in there, right? We've been put into different realities. This is the divide and conquer stuff. And until we address these issues, how can we ever hope to fix them, right? And electing people, um, like, I like what John says. I like, like, there's a few politicians, and Danielle Smith, what she's saying out in Alberta. Um, why didn't they say it when we needed them to? Right? We had one, Randy Hillier, and they're still hammering him. So until people come to we'll know them by their fruits, right? They've shown us who they are. And I don't know. I love geeking. If you want to go down, yeah, if you want to like to explain these things, like no one understands anything anymore. And I like that the information that explains what's going on is just it's right there under the surface. All you have to do is look, right? And we've been shown, all the psychological experiments that were conducted. They call it MK Ultra, and it sounds all spooky and stuff. But these are psychological experiments that were going on in Western universities all over the place, trying to figure out what makes people tick, right? And in the 50s and 60s, there was some stuff called the Ash conformity studies. And I don't know if you're familiar, but they've got cool YouTube videos. It's like a 10-minute video, and it shows you these experiments and what people will do to conform to fit in, right? And you see guys going in giving obviously wrong answers to fit in with the crowd, right? People think that they're involved in a massive experiment where they're the only actual one in the experiment. Everyone else is actors, right? Giving false answers, and they will lie to fit in. And what we've been shown is that the vast majority of people will shape their worldview to fit into these circumstances. Okay, so low testosterone males, the majority of low testosterone males and women will process new information through the rubric of not is this true or is this false, but do people believe this is true, right? And when you look at social evolution, you can explain why this would be important, right? And it explains so many things that we've seen over the last couple of years, right? So when you have the vast majority of uh, of the citizens that are processing new information like this, right? An omnipresent media delivery of government-sponsored information that's false quickly becomes adopted by that population, right? And so you have, high testosterone alpha males and neurotypical people, right? Who, autists or whatever you want to call them, right? The people that just kind of process information differently, they see it. But when you have these people that
Go
process
along to get
information,
along.
yeah, people that process this information like this, they virtue signal to demonstrate to the tribe, right? I believe this to be true. And they persecute the people that don't see things that way, right? So when you see, guys walking into Canadian Tire without masks and just getting pummeled and right and stuff like that, and it's just like, look, I believe this to be true, and a demonstration of this to the group, which makes sense evolutionarily speaking, right? Because it's like you want to fit into the tribe, because if you don't, you starve to death in the cold, right? Whereas high testosterone alpha males and aneurotypicals that are resilient and capable don't have such a large onus for that. And those are the people that you need in leadership, right? That process information through the rubric of is this true or is this not true? And not care what other people think, which is, how we've been led so far astray so quickly. And I think if we have any hope of turning around what's been done, we need to get these, aneurotypicals at the helm. Unfortunately, most of them don't want to do it, right? That's the thing. The people that seek out these positions, typically.
Is there a helicopter in the background there?
I'm near a road. I'm near a road.
Uh,
So yeah.
I want to go back to what you said at the beginning, where you said we've come so far and we've covered so much ground. So many people I know now are politically involved at some level, even if it's a part of being a Gmail chat group, just sending emails back and forth. This isn't 2018 where we talked about Game of Thrones or a TV show.
Yeah. Yeah. It's once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? And it's like that. Like the natives say, you've got two wolves inside you, right? You've got a good wolf and you've got an evil wolf, and they're fighting constantly. And it's, well, which wolf wins? The one you feed, right? And once you start to see, you can't really go back, right? Like we're not going to be having a conversation, 5 years from now. It's like, oh, remember when we were so off base and the government actually just loved us and we were confused about things, right? Like that's the conversation that's never going to happen. And knowing the way people think and the way people process information, I think it's important to keep telling them, right? Um, this is what's going on. Like, I don't have it up yet, but on my website, for my campaign website, and this is politically, this is a bad move, right? Because it marginalizes me. A lot of people are like, "Oh, he's a crazy conspiracy theorist," but there was a lot of people in our province and across this nation and across other nations that were coerced into healthcare decisions that they didn't want to make over the last couple of years, right? And many of them are suffering negative consequences from those decisions. And I'm here to tell you, right, like during my campaign, there are things you can do to mitigate the risks of these decisions. And there's resources out there. There's people that are trying to help you. And I think we need to continue, telling them that. It's just like there is a way out. There is things you can do to improve your health. And I'm going to have a resource page on my website to be able to, access these resources and maybe mitigate some of the things that have been done. Is that right? Is that the sound political move? No. But I'm not in here for the sound political move, right? Like I said, I'm a soldier and a nurse, and I'm here to serve. If you don't want that, then that's cool, right? But you're being given an opportunity. Like Canada's being given an opportunity for the first time in a very, very long time. When the PPC stood up, Max planted a flag in 2018, right? And I believe the Overton windows moving to that flag. How soon we get there, I think, is dependent on the effectiveness of people like you and me, on our ability to reach across that divide and let people know. It's like we're all in this together, right? And they paint us with the brush of hate, and it's like, oh, you're Nazis, you're racists, you're xenophobes, you're anti-Semites, right? They project all that stuff onto us, right? And it's effective, right?
Can
It
I
is.
pick up on that? You said
Sure.
Nazis. Do you know Elizabeth Nixon? She has a Substack page.
I don't.
Anyway,
Yeah.
she's a really good writer, and she put out an article a few days ago, and she picked up on remember the Nazi and the Confederate flag during the Freedom Convoy,
Yeah.
and she said like those pictures got traced back to one photographer, and that photographer got traced back to, I believe she said, the Prime Minister's office. But
Yeah.
all of this stuff gets memory hold, so that but people are starting to wake up that the RCMP or whoever's behind this thesis, that you can't trust these institutions anymore. They're just corrupt.
It's right. Like, and as soon as I saw it, like I said, I'm a psyops guy, right? So I filter things a little differently. And as soon as I saw it, I'm like, oh, well played, right? Like I was in Ottawa when James Topp was there, right? And as soon as James Topp, he gave his speech when he arrived at the tomb of the unknown soldier, right? And a CBC News crew showed up, set up their cameras. As soon as they set up their cameras, this Aboriginal woman protester was going, and there's a tussle with the cops, right?
I
And
saw that. I was there. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
right. And it was just boom, 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 right. And then cameras down, and right. And then you see CBC. I was at another thing with Max on Parliament Hill, right, and there was like 10,000 people. Like, it was huge. It was huge, right. And before it even started, the CBC news crews, they set up and they positioned the camera so you could see a couple of people, and they always look for the craziest people, right? Because there's crazy there. We were like, oh, right? And there's a lot on our side too, right? And they'll go for the things that they can market the most, right? And so they'll set up their camera angles like, oh, look, like 13 people showed up. This is like, they're just this fringe minority. And, and in Vancouver, I was down at the protest, and the global news crew comes up, and you see them scan the crowd, and they go over, and the first guy they talk to is with the guy with some crazy helmet on and the Trump 2020 flag draped over his shoulders, and they go up and they ask him a bunch of questions, and of course he gives the answers that you'd expect him to give. And then they just go through and they pick, okay, who's the next craziest person, or the most stereotypical person that we can portray here. And they pick like three people out of the crowd of thousands, right? And then they walk away, and as they're walking away, they're laughing. It's like, yeah, this will be good. This will be good coffee, right? um I think, you look at the effectiveness of which they do this, and then the advent of AI and the things that we're seeing now. When we talk to people and we look at how can people believe these things, we're not looking at the same stuff, right? So you look at this division that's occurred between men and women, right? And the driving of this wedge. You look at divorce rates, and you look at all these things, and the MGTOW, and all the hyper feminism stuff, and it's just like they're trying to put a war between the sexes, and we've got this history of oppression, and women have been oppressed. It's like, what? We're in this together, right? You think men and women have been in war our entire existence? We're in this together. And they push this narrative, right? And when a woman looks at something on the internet, she'll do a Google search, right? And a guy does a Google search, like, they see different things, right? If you're a Liberal Party member and like, this is the kind of, you watch CNN, you consume this kind of media. If you type in Kamala Harris, right, you don't see the videos that I see of Kamala Harris when I type in on a Google search, right? Like, the advent of big data and the ability to process this kind of, the technology is being used to keep us so separated and so siloed. Like, we face like significant challenges with this stuff, and people's inability to comprehend the impact of this big data, and their ability to use it to keep everyone right where they want them. It's incredible. Like, I don't know if you've ever asked yourself this question, because I look at it and it's like, given that what's been done and the amount of people that have been affected like this, how have we not seen violence at this point?
I can answer that. I mean, and it's not an AI thing, but just from my observation, first of all, when people take the vaccine, they don't spontaneously combust. Like, that's literally what you need, like cause and effect, for people to make that connection.
Yeah.
And the other one is, you already answered this. There's a big segment of the population that expects government to keep them safe. So whenever I'm getting into debates with people, specifically ones on the left, I just ask them straight up, like, what is the purpose of government? And they'll say, to keep people safe. And I'll be like, well, I believe government exists to, secure our rights, run the courts. We'll never compromise. Good day and goodbye.
Yeah. And what do they want to be kept safe from? Right? Like, and this is the inability to recognize the real threats, because 24/7 this fear porn is pumped into their phones, their computers, their televisions, their radios, right? And people are afraid of, H5N1 and cow farts and systemic racism and the climate emergency, right? And it's just like, okay, well, they're running the printing presses around the clock. We've got over 2 million people a year coming into our nation, most of them fighting age males from sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East. You look at, our economic policy, our collapsing healthcare system, all these things, the despair and lack of hope in young people in ever being able to afford a house or have the standard of living. Like, standard of living is going off a cliff, right? And people see this, and it's just like this despair. And what's the government's response? Well, give them more drugs. Like, it's absolutely insane. And the the things that are stared at, we have these clear and present dangers right in front of us, and that's not what they're focusing on. And the ability to do this. So when you look at in the military, we call it stress inoculation, right? So when you go into like basic training, and everyone's watching movies and stuff like that, and what you do is you take these group of people and you increase the stress, right? You give them unreasonable timings, sleep deprivation, all these things, right? And you just keep ramping up the stress and ramping up the stress and ramping up the stress until the troops start to fidget, start to freak out. You'll see some of them starting to break down, right? And then you dial it back, right? And you acclimate, right? And then you start applying the stress again, and you take it further than you did before, and you go until they start to fidget, and then you dial it back, right? And their ability to monitor what people are thinking through social media, and like we've gotten to a place technologically where they're able to monitor absolutely everything, right? And their finger on the pulse, they know, yeah, we need to dial it back now. We need to reduce the stressors before this boils over. And I think we're there, right? And you look at our ability to determine what's real. I don't know. You look at the quality of disinformation, and this is no stretch, right? Like, they've announced this publicly. It was Bill Casey in '81 who said, "We'll know our job is complete when everything the American public believes is false." Right? And I believe we're there. When he was talking about Operation Mockingbird and the CIA's coordination with media and how to control public sentiment, and we've seen this acceleration over the last few years. Like, when I did my PSYOPs training in 2008, it was illegal to conduct operations domestically, right? These were only things that you could use in foreign theaters. And I know the Americans, with the Smith Modernization Act in 2012, with the Obama administration, they reversed that, right? It used to be illegal to propagandize people. They did it anyways, but it was technically illegal. And they removed those safeguards to use propaganda domestically. And that's when we saw the rapid change within the media and within news. And we did the same things up here, right? And the government's been shown, right? Like, their own press, like the CBC, talks about, COVID-19 was an opportunity for psychological operations in the military to conduct these things, right? Like, they don't hide it. Like, they're doing it in the open, but because most people are distracted and not paying attention, they're not seeing it. And that seems to be some sort of spiritual contract, right? Like, as long as they show you and you don't object, that's interpreted as consent, and they just carry on, right? And our minds aren't built to deal with this much information, right? We're cognitively incapable of dealing with this vast amount of information. Like, this is a 10,000 front war that's been, just incrementally, step by step, and every step we just normalize, right? Like, if I jumped in a time machine and I went back and not even told you, I went to an NDP rally 10 years ago, and I told you, that, yeah, even 10 short years ago, that schools would be sexualizing children, introducing gender confusion, promoting surgeries and hormone replacement therapy, and that there be tampons in the men's bathrooms of federal government buildings and the army and all this stuff, what would they have said? Like, you're insane. Yet that's commonplace today, right? And people defend it. And if you point at it, you're hate filled. Like, they've
It's
done
really
that.
strange. Yeah. You're a psychological psyops guy, so you probably understand it. But I look at it, and it's very strange. So the parents disagree with what's going on in the schools, but if you point it out and you make it real, they disagree with you for being a bad person.
Yeah, yeah. And and we've seen like the Soji 123 stuff, right? Like, we've seen that's what woke some people up. Like, even before COVID, right? It was Soji. There were some people on the front lines, and they were fighting this stuff, and it was so insane. And I remember when I first heard it, I'm like, what? It's easy to spit. These people are crazy. Like, there's no way that exists, right? And it's like, no, that exists. That's real. This is what they're doing. And you look at this absolute insanity that's being brought in, and it's been normalized, right? Because of the way we're wired, right? We're very, very adaptable creatures. That's what makes us so good at stuff, right? Being able to go into an environment and manipulate it, and we adapt. We adapt to hardship. We adapt to um, yeah, just our surroundings. Like, things normalize for us very quickly, right? And you look at how far we've been brought and how quickly we've been brought here, and some people don't see it. And the trading of comfort and convenience for what's obviously right, right? Like, when I grew up, like when I was younger, right? Because I went through school, and looking back at it now, I see it. I didn't then, right? I was just, it was school. Um, and it wasn't like it is now, but I see the trends and the things that they're implementing now. I see, several increments back where we were at that period of time, and I recognize it now, in hindsight. But you look at these things, and these people are complaining that the schools are doing a terrible job. I would argue the opposite. I think that schools are doing an excellent job. If they weren't, the government would change it, right? The problem is people have their expectations of what school is supposed to be, and the government has their expectations of what school is supposed to be, right? And what we've seen and what we've been shown, especially during COVID-19, is the ability to educate people out of the capacity to be able to think for themselves, question authority, and stand up to scrutiny, right? So people are saying, oh, we've got to change public education. It's like, well, that's one way to do it, or you could just not use public education, right? Because anytime you have a government involved making decisions, they're going to incentivize things for the well-being of the government. That's just the way nature works, right? So if the government sees a benefit in, introducing gender confusion and the inability to think for yourself and the complete reliance on government going forward, then that's beneficial to them, right? And as we've been shown, and it's become clear that a lot of these policies that we've adopted here in Canada are also being adopted in the United States and Germany and Australia. And it's like, okay, well, do you think that we just came to these stunningly bad conclusions in a vacuum, right? Or is there a plan? Right? It's like, you're a conspiracy theorist. I was like, actually, no, there's a plan. It's on their website, right? Just because I'm pointing at a burning house doesn't make me the arsonist, right? I don't like this fire. I'm just pointing to, it's like, hey, our house is on fire, right? So when you look at these plans, and it's just like, this is nothing new. right?
I'm reminded of something Elon Musk put out. He said, he goes like living through 2024 is like there's a house on fire and you run into the house to save the guy, and the guy's repeatedly punching you in the face.
Yeah, what are you doing? What are you
Yeah.
doing? Yeah, it's it's absolutely remarkable, right? And when you look at this, and I think most of the people in this fight are coming to that conclusion. Like, oh, there's a different dynamic to what's going on than a lot of people want to talk about. Um, but I think there's a spiritual component to this, right? You look at the reactions and the way people behave, and it's like, how could someone be misled like this, or how could someone come to these conclusions? And it seems like there's a fundamental difference in outlook. And like when I go down to Vancouver, like I was down there for a speaking engagement a little while ago, and on our way there, I was with Odessa and Mark, and I got Odessa. I'm like, hey, can we just go down to Maine and Hastings? I hadn't been down there in a couple of years, quite a while, right? And I was just kind of curious. And you look at that expansion of that area, and just the human tragedy and the social decay that's on display in that city is breathtaking. And the fact that that exists in a first world nation, like, we should be ashamed. It's you can judge I think you can judge a society by how well it takes care of its most vulnerable, right? And you look at that, and that's not just in Vancouver. There's segments of Kelowna that are like that. We see that in Vernon. We see that in small towns, right? These tent cities popping up. And you look at this, and it's just like, how do we tolerate this, right? And you look at the bleeding hearts that, you know, point to people like me and you and call us racist and callous and cold and uncaring. And it's just like, are your policies helping these people? Is throwing money and drugs at them and destroying the communities that they live in helping? Like, we need a new way to move forward. And you know, these addiction issues, when you look around, how can we not have these addiction issues? People treat pain. You break your arm, right? People take pain medication for that because it hurts. And you look at these addiction issues, and it's just like, they're treating a different kind of pain. And they've, you know, the size of the segment of our population is growing. And as we descend into this darkness, this is just going to continue, right? So, um, at what point are people willing to try something different, a different outlook? I don't know. I don't know, right? Like, you see, the common consensus is just, I think it has to hurt more, right? People, like, how can you send your kid to public school today? Like, we see these alternative education options popping up everywhere. People are starting to get it, but for the most people, right? Um, they're just like, yeah, no, we're going to send them there. It's like, okay, but look what they're doing to kids, and our inability to protect children, like social media. And I saw this in real time in my emergency career, right? Um, when Facebook was introduced, you know, in 2006 or 2005 or whatever it was, and this explosion of adoption with young people. So historically, girls were thought to be less violent than boys, right? And that it's not true. They just engage in different types of violence, right? And social media is basically a tool for girl violence, right? And we saw the statistics bore out. We saw when these technologies came into widespread adoption, the devastating effect it had on all people and children, but girls especially, right? A stratospheric rise in suicidality and self-harm and cutting and all these things, right? These tools that are used, and we know this. We like this isn't a secret. This is well known as within psychology. It's well known with anyone that works in healthcare and is paying attention, right? There's lots of people talking about Jonathan Haidt. He does a really good talk on the catastrophic effects of social media and young girls, right? And we saw it. And so grade 12 first year university girls, they had developed enough of a personality that this didn't have as much of an effect, right? But middle school age girls and younger girls, and it's just, you look at the increase in anxiety and suicidality and all these things, and it's just like, it's devastating. So you think that we'd like, okay, well, we need to stop social media being used by these age groups. Has that happened? No. It's more widespread adoption. It's just like, yeah, we need to give phones to kids earlier, right? I didn't get a phone until 2010. I
Times have
had them when they,
changed, though.
yeah, I had one early when cell phones first came out, and I hated it, right? And I held out to 2010, and now they're indispensable, right? Like we're doing this meeting over a cell phone. Like the technology is so good, and you become so reliant on it. But when you look at the consequences of these technologies, especially on our youth, like there's no debate of what it does, but we're not protecting them from that.
Sean, sorry, we're at the end of the episode.
Oh, okay.
I was
That was a little
wondering.
tangential.
No, that's fine. That's fine. It was a good chat. I was just wondering if you could, in ending the episode, tell people how they can learn more about you, where they can follow you, and if you're on the campaign trail, where they can link up with you.
Okay, so yeah, I'm running as an independent. My name's Sean Taylor. I'm running as an independent in Boundary-Similkameen. Uh, my website is seantaylor.ca. We've got links to my social media. I'm not much of a social media guy, so I've got a bunch of people helping me, and it'll be more developed here over the next week or two. There'll be links on my Facebook if you want to come out and grill me with questions and see what's going on. We'll have the dates and times there. Moving forward, yeah, I don't know where this goes, but I plan on doing more of this stuff. And, and thanks for having me, man. Like, what you do is so important. We just need to continue the messaging, right? Like they are, right? People, this is like the Maoist struggle period, right? Where you destroy the old ways of thinking, the old ways of doing things, old traditions, right? Traditions are what? They're solutions to problems that we forgot existed. And as they tear this down, we need to have a counter argument to balance this out. And the voice is growing louder, right? We see this awakening happening, not just in BC, not just in Canada, but around the world. And we'll get there. We'll get there. So I'm excited. I think this is the most incredible time to be alive ever. And yeah, I'm looking forward to our continued success, and hopefully making some positive changes here in the next little while.
Well, Mr. Taylor, thank you very much for coming on.
All right. God bless, and have a good day.
You too. See ya.